Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it. I think it's common knowledge at high school that we have to deal with players' confidence quite a bit because they're younger, they're still becoming. But I've just been amazed at having these conversations at how often college coaches still have to deal with players' confidence and help them out. So how do you at your level build confidence in players?
Yeah, I actually think it might even be, there's a chance it could be more challenging in college because you have kids that are coming from finding the confidence in high school and then it getting broken and taken away again and then having to find it again or being, all these guys around you were all good players in high school. Everybody that's in college was a good player in high school. So now you're here, you don't get to play. It gets broken down. Now you're here, you don't shoot the ball as well because it's a little tougher or your skill level doesn't translate the way you thought it was, or you're not as big as you were, like you can be a 6'3" post and be dominating and then come to college and be like, man, everybody's 6'8". I can't do any of the stuff there's all these things. So, and like I said before, honestly, it's the same. I feel like I'm regurgitating the same thing, but I really believe it's relationship and it's freedom and it's finding identity in other things other than what you think it should be. And because when your expectation is set one way, there's only one thing that's going to make you happy. And then the reality is once you get to that, you know what happens? The bar just moves. It's not actually done. You're like, I want to, be the leading scorer on the team. And you go and you do that. You accomplish it. Well, guess what you're going to do right when you do that? Well, now I want to be the leading scorer in the district, or I want to be the leading scorer. And then next thing you know, I want to be all state. And then next thing you know, I want to be, and it's the bar never moves. So you can keep, with confidence, especially, it's so results driven. Like we said, it's just like coaching. It's results driven. And I think we have these same struggles, but when you can become more process driven and more internally driven, and then I think the biggest thing of it all is the word I used a minute ago, identity. I think identity is huge. And these kids, especially now, are just torn down based on who they are by whether things worked or not. And so can we get them out of it? I don't know. A lot of times it takes a lot of conversations. Sometimes it takes getting in the gym. One thing we always say is when you go to take a test at school, if you didn't study and the teacher goes, we have a test today, and you're like, that moment we've all had, you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. And so you're looking around and they give the test, your heart's pounding and you're nervous. But if you studied and you did it, you'll be like, oh yeah, give me the test. I'll go, you just want to do it. So you put the work in, do it early and make sure you're prepared. And if you're doing those things, then that takes a lot of it away. I think that helps with your confidence. But even then, sometimes the results don't match exactly what it looks like in the timing that you expect. So it's just make sure you're true to who you are, identify with who you are, be confident in who you are, and then let your work speak for itself. And eventually it's all going to come together, you would hope.
What's the balance for a coach? Because I'm thinking to conversations I've had where I actually might be the one raising the bar for them in a sense of this year's done. You did awesome, phenomenal year. Now let's set these goals. But I hear what you're saying, that not being okay with who you are and where you're at in that moment. What's the difference, or what's the balance between, setting goals and striving for something, working towards something, but then, being on that wheel that players just can't seem to get off?
Yeah, I don't know that I have the right answer to that, because I think it's give and take. Yeah. I read a book one time called Burn Your Goals. There's another one for you. Burn your goals.
That's right.
They used to write down, there is some people at North Carolina, I think soccer something, I can't remember exactly what they did.
Yeah, you're right.
They would write down the goals and then throw it in the fire and burn it up. And it was all about process driven stuff. And it was good stuff. And goals aren't bad. So it's obviously not bad to strive for something like that. I just think that you have to be able to also, when you're giving that to your kids, also tell them we're going to strive for this, but if it doesn't look exactly like this, I'm not disappointed in you. I'm not you didn't fail. Let's just put the work in to try to get there. And if we finish these things and we get to these points and we can get to there, and if they achieve it, then that's a win. It's awesome. And you can be like, look what the work did for you. And if they don't be there, to be like, yeah, but look how much better, at these things, and you're picking little things to make sure that you're encouraging them on the back end of it. with things other than just the goals. Because I think the hardest thing for us coaches is you set the goals. What happens if you can tell it's about to fall short? Like, are we aware enough to not be angry? That's back to that word I'll tell you in the book I'm reading about being angry. Are we getting angry because they didn't do what they were supposed to do, quote unquote? Or can we still be like, how can I either encourage them, challenge them, or push them, to do more? Or did they do the most they can and they just don't quite have the ceiling I was expecting? Because that happens too.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes they're just not, sometimes they just don't have the capacity to get to where you thought they could. And you got to be able to make sure that they're okay when they realize that, because it's our job to make sure that they're not, their life's not torn apart because they thought they could be an All-American and they couldn't quite get there. They're still a good player, but not really All-American status. And doesn't mean they're less valuable or anything like that. So, I mean, yeah.
I think too, we have to, we help them see the potential and what they can be. But if it just ends with, I almost thought about, like, I read Bird Your Goals, and I like the idea of, writing down what those goals are, but then on another piece of paper, how do you, like, what's the work that has to happen, guys? How do you think, if this is what you want, how do you think you get there? Because I think I've been guilty of, even in my,
that's good.
Even in my own life, I like to get a little leaner. I like to put on a little bit. That's my goal. But then there's no follow through. There's no work with it. So, like, almost like we burn this one. Okay, guys, this is the one that matters now. I may kind of mess with that a little bit, because I don't want to be the guy that just is helping them realize where they'd like to be, what they like to see happen, but then not helping them at all with the follow through or giving them a plan. Because then the worst thing, and I feel like I do it all the time as a coach, is I know what they want. I sit here patiently, watch them either do it or not do it, the work. And then at the end, I come back around and be like, you know what? You really didn't put in the time necessary to get that. That's not helpful. And so I'm just trying to kind of, I guess, work my way through with my own players. How can I help them? And that might be a way.
No, that's big. No, that's huge. And I think, you nailed it. I probably should have said that too. You really nailed it. It's setting goals, but then setting process and making sure you're doing both, so that one way or another, if there's an easily achievable thing for them, so that they can see success. Because if you say, this is where we want your end goal to be, but we can do that by doing this 3 times a week. Well, if they do their thing 3 times a week, that's a win. If they didn't get to the goal, then they didn't get to the goal. But you did the work to try to get as close as you could. And now we can still praise you, but also push you to get somewhere. And that's good. That's really good, actually.
And maybe it takes clarity too on our part of actually knowing how, okay, this is what you say you want.
That's true.
I better have a really good answer or a good roadmap. Coach, how do I do this? Well, why don't you try this? Man, you can't just throw stuff up against the wall. True. So I think maybe that I'm always trying to think of why don't myself or more coaches do this, and maybe coaches out there are doing this, and it's just maybe an area that I'm weak in. But because there's an accountability that I have to, once I know what their goals are and we've come up with the process, there's accountability on my side to help them get there. And then if it's not working, man, I think as coaches, we have to have answers, not perfection, but answers to what they're going through.
And that means we got to put thought and process into it. I like to do that before we have our meetings with our players. It's just, really put some thought into each kid and don't just come in there and wing it, so when they say something, you'd be like, well, I hear what you're saying for yourself. Like, I just had to have this one the other day. He's saying what he thinks he's the next role. And I'm like, okay, I think you're getting ahead of yourself a little bit. I think you're, where you're looking at yourself. I think there's a smaller step we can look at right now as the current goal, instead of trying to get to when you're 4 years down the road and you feel like that's where you can be right now. Like, I think you're putting too much, and it could end up hindering your development because you're looking too far down the road. So let's just pick a couple of smaller things and then work together on how we can push you towards that end goal you want to get eventually, but get you to where I see you at right now. And then if I have a little bit of a plan, then we can work together and we can come up with a solution.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.